Alright, man. Saws are not for survival or bug out or bushcraft, which means batoning is even more useless for those areas. Stick with me, man. Cue the intro. I know some of y'all are sick of this one, and I almost wasn't going to do it, but then I said I would, so I just needed to do what I said I was going to do. So here we go. So y'all have been on a little bit of a tear on batoning here lately, and this is the last in that trilogy. This is my batoning trilogy, and it's about why saws are not for bug out and survival and bushcraft. And I hear the wailing and gnashing of teeth now, and I'm going to show you why. And because saws aren't for those issues, suddenly batoning just becomes, actually, you know what, I don't have a big a deal with the batoning as I do the saws. But anyway, we're going to try to knock this one out here real quick. All right, quick recap. Why do people baton, and why do I think it? People baton to get kindling out of the middle of dry wood, supposedly. Where I got a rainy day here today, and my main point today is going to be that saws don't work very well in the rain. And I know that sounds silly, but they don't. So so let's start with why saws. So you baton when you need dry wood for kindling and it's wet out. So here's the problem. Saws, and we're going to see if I can show you this. If you cut wet wood with a saw, your saw, can you see that little coating on there? Mm-hmm. Your saw gets coated with this little cellulose coating. And it completely renders the saw, maybe not ineffective, but far less effective. And if you read some of the stories about the old days, you know, some of the old men will talk to you about how they were cutting firewood with this is a big crosscut saw, which I have used to cut multiple cords of firewood with. I've used this a fair amount. It would get so bad that they would think that the saw had to be resharpened, and we'll get to that in a second. And it didn't. They would just have to be cleaned, and they'd go complain to their mother or their father, and they'd say, clean it. And they'd use a solvent or sometimes like a lye. They would call it soap and water, but the soap then was a lye, which is a solvent. And they would have to clean that cellulose off of the teeth of the saw. And that gets on there when you're cutting wet wood, either physically wet wood or green wood. And it coats the teeth of your saw, and it makes it drastically less effective. So that if you're using your survival bug out bushcraft saw on wet wood in the rain, you're literally only going to get a couple uses out of it before it has to be cleaned with some kind of solvent or solvent-like substance, which in bushcraft, bug out, survival, you don't have. These are a high maintenance item for that reason. If you're using them for batoning for dry wood, that means you're cutting wet wood, you're cutting in the rain, and you're getting that little cellulose coating. That might not be the right term, but it sounds good, so I'm going to use it. You're going to get that little cellulose coating on your teeth, and your saw is officially ineffective or far less effective until you get those teeth cleaned. On that same note, you guys just saw me cut a quick piece of dry hardwood. We're gonna see if I can demonstrate this next one graphically. Hold on a second. Watch this. Alright, you can see this saw does pretty good on that sweet gum. That's because this saw has a set to the teeth, a pattern to the teeth that works well. It's an American style pattern. I can't remember what it's called. It works well on dry hardwood. We're gonna come over here, and I'm gonna try to show you how it compares on a different type of wood. Go ahead. Try it on this cedar. I know it may look like I'm doing this on purpose, but I'm not. It is drastically less effective on a different type of wood that it's not designed for. That blew my mind when I first heard it too. But this is another reason why saws are not good for survival, bug out, bushcraft, because the teeth are specific to the different types of wood. Now you can get a general style tooth, but then it cuts down drastically on the efficiency of the saw. And now you're not saving your calories like you're trying to do. You have a general purpose saw that is vastly less effective on the different types of wood. This is actually a really good saw. This is a E. Garlic and Sons Lynx brand Sheffield. This is a really good saw on its intended wood, dry hardwood. And I can cut a cord of firewood with this shockingly easy, surprisingly easily. But it does terrible on green wood, green hardwood of any kind. Awful. If I'm trying to cut a green tree with it, a green tree is one that hasn't dried, you know, it's still living basically, technically. It does terrible, like almost can't do it. Or if you try to use it on pine, or like this cedar you just saw, is drastically less effective than it would be on its intended type of wood. And all saws are like that basically, hand saws basically. All right, one last item and we'll just do it while we're here, and we'll make this a quick one and hopefully you can watch it. This is a high maintenance item. Sharpening saws is a skill set that few men possess, and it requires specific tools that you would not have with you in a bushcraft survival bug out situation, and therefore your saw is only going to be effective for a limited period of time, and your saw will get dull. Mostly, the biggest issue is there's stuff caught in the bark. Even on a standing tree, there'll be little pieces of stone it picks up as it grows, dirt, whatnot. But especially if you drop the tree and you're you're bucking it on the ground, you're going to have little pieces of dirt and grit and rock, and sometimes these will even be in the tree itself, that are going to hit your tooth as you're cutting, and it's going to dull your saw. It will dull your saw. Saws have to be sharpened periodically. I have not sharpened this saw yet. I've cut 2 cords of firewood with it, and I've had it for 3 years, and I have yet to have to sharpen it. But I was using it on wood that I cut with a chainsaw that had sat and cured, and then that I put on a sawhorse, and I had a wire brush attached to my sawhorse, and I would clean each piece of wood before I cut it. I would take the wire brush and get all the dirt and grit off of the wood before I cut it. And that's the only reason why it hasn't had to be sharpened yet, and it probably could stand to be sharpened. It seemed to do okay on that sweet gum over there, but that's dry sweet gum, and it's a pretty light wood. I'll try it later this season on something harder like a cherry, or maybe I'll cut a hickory, and we'll see how it does. It does awful on pine though. You saw how much it didn't want to do this cedar. So for these 3 reasons, what was my first one? Oh, damn it, I gotta watch my own video now. All right, well, I won't go in order then. What was the first one I talked about over there? Basically, saws are a high intensity, are highly maintenance intensive, and they have limited applicability as far as different types of wood go. And they have to be, that was, we were talking about the wetness, cutting wood, either green wood or wet wood. So if you cut green wood or wet wood, you have to be able to clean your saw, because their teeth are going to get coated in basically a cellulose type thing. It's going to dry, and it's going to essentially insulate the wood from your cutting surface. There's just going to be this tough coating of this stuff on there, and it's not going to cut. They generally are only efficient and effective on specific types of wood. So if you're not cutting the type of wood it's designed for, then it's going to be far less efficient and effective, and to the point of sometimes ineffective. I tried to cut a green sweet gum with this one time, and I gave up. It was just a total waste of time. And then they have to be sharpened. They have to be sharpened. And then you need heavy, or tools that aren't even capable. To sharpen this one, you need a vise, you need a long straight edge, you need a hammer, you need punches to reset the kerf, it's called. It's hard to see, but these teeth are bent out at angles, and so that angle has to be precise on all these teeth. The kerf has to match all the way down for the saw to be effective, because if one's too far out, the ones around it won't cut and it'll snag, and if they're too far in, the kerf is very important, and you have to have punches and hammers, and you've got to have gauges and all this stuff and files and whatnot to sharpen the saw, and you simply cannot carry those things with you, especially in survival and bug out, when you do not know when you're going to be back in a position where your saw can be maintained and sharpened, or even cleaned. These are not for those are the 3 reasons saws are not for survival: bug out, bushcraft. They're for camping, and that's fine. They're great for camping. They're great around the homestead. You know, I love this one. I love using it to cut my firewood with. It's a lot of fun. It's nowhere. It does not save the calories necessarily that you would think it did. It's still hard work cutting with a saw, but not as hard as it would be, you know, trying to cut firewood with an axe. So, I mean, I'll give you that. But anyway, there you go, man. Saws are for homesteads. They're for around the house. They're for bucking firewood, felling big trees. They're not for bug out. They're not for survival. They're not for bushcraft, which means batoning is not for survival, not for bug out, not for bushcraft. Men, we're done with this topic. We won't come back to it again until I want to tweak somebody, which could be soon. So who knows? It might not be that long. But we appreciate you. Thank you.